All right, so 10.7, we're going to be talking problem solving, and the first topic that we're going to look at is compound interest. All right, so there is a formula for compound interest, and it is A equals P times 1 plus R over N to the power of NT. That's a lot of variables, right? Okay, so copy it down, and then underneath it, you're going to write what all of those stand for. The A is going to be the total amount of money at the end. That's usually what you're solving for. But when you get into some of the more complicated ones, they're going to give you the total amount, and you're going to either find the interest rate or the number of years, that kind of thing. The P is going to be the principal. Principal stands for the starting amount of money or the starting value. R is going to be your interest rate given as a decimal. So if it's given to you as 6%, you're going to take that decimal, move it 2 places to the left, and change it to 0.06. N is going to be the number of times of interest given in a year, because that could be different. You could have 4 times a year, you could have 12 times a year, you could have twice a year, or you could just have once a year. If it doesn't really state, then it is just going to be once a year. And then T is, they're going to tell you how many years. So over 8 years, over 30 years, just how many of each of those items. All right, so there's 2 things that we need to talk about. So as you get older and you learn more about loans and the value of things, these terms will be more familiar to you. But for now, let's just go over them. So if you see in a problem that it says monthly, that means that the number of times per year is going to be what? 12. Okay. If you see quarterly, anybody know that one? Quarterly. That's going to be 4 times a year. If you see it quarterly would be every 3 months, which occurs 4 times a year. Semi-annually, twice a year. If you see annually, that's just how many times a year? Once. And then there's going to be problems that don't say any of these things. So if it's none, it's going to be once a year. So if it doesn't say specifically semi-annually, quarterly, monthly, just assume there's a 1 there. And so if you're multiplying by a 1, sometimes people don't write it, or you're going to end up with the same number, because 1 times 8 years is still going to be 8. Okay? Does that make sense? The other thing that I want to point out in the equation up here is that there's this number 1. This number 1 represents 100%. Right? So if we have 34 students in our room, and on a given day, everybody shows up, we have 100%, right? Which is if you wrote it as a decimal, 100% would be 1. Does that make sense? So if we are saying 1 plus the rate over the number of times in a given year, you include the 1, you would add it when your value is increasing. That's when you add, right? So things that go up in value, your bank account, like if you have money in a savings account, right, or an IRA, or most of the time, the value of your house goes up, right? Sometimes it goes down depending on where you live or if there's a drop in the market or whatever. But generally, the value of your house goes up. But sometimes the value of things goes down, right? Like, generally when you buy a car, the value of it will immediately start to decrease, unless you're buying some like classic and it's some 1956 Corvette, blah, 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 something, then the value of it's going to increase. But generally, it's the value of it's going down. So while this equation up here has a plus in it, depending on the scenario is whether it's going to be 1 plus whatever rate it's increasing by, or 1 minus whatever rate it's increasing by, okay? So basically, if this whole part right here is greater than 1, if that value is, if that value is greater than 1, it's increasing. And if it's greater than 0, but less than 1, it's going to be decreasing. You're not going to see a negative number there. It's just going to be between 0 and 1, which is less than 100%. Does that make sense? Because 100% is 1. All right? So let's look at the type of problem you're going to see. So number 1, example number 1, we're going to find what is the balance on $15,000 deposited at 6%, 6% interest, compounded quarterly, for 4 years. Shrink it just a tad and move it up. There you go. Okay. So we're going to start plugging into that equation. So we want the total money at the end, right? So that's going to be our A. It's what we want to end up with. And then that's going to be equal to the principal, or the starting amount, which in this case is $15,000. But when you type in your calculator, do you need the comma? No, so we're just going to go 15,000. Okay, if you want to write a comma, that's fine. Just know that when you type in your calculator, you're obviously not going to do that, right? And then we're going to multiply that by 1, and then we need to decide, is this investment growing or is this investment decreasing? It's growing. Yeah. Yeah, we're depositing it into account at the bank, and we're going to earn money on it, right? So it's going to be plus, and this one is 6%. So we take the decimal and we move it 2 places to the left, and that's going to give us 0.06 divided by, or over, the number of times the interest is given per year. Okay, so per year it said what? Quarterly. So quarterly is going to mean 4 times per year. Okay? Then we need to raise it to the power of the number of times per year, which we just said was 4, times the number of years, which is also 4. Okay? You can type this straight into the calculator like this, and it will do for you. You just have to tell it the order of operations. But it might be easier to simplify it first, then type it into your calculator. So for an easier way to type it into the calculator, I'm going to take the 0.06, divide it by 4. That should get you 0.015. And then if you add the 1, you actually will get 1.015. So try that on your calculator. Do the 0.06 divided by 4 and then add 1. You should get what I got, 1.015. And then obviously to the power of 4 times 4, 16. Makes it a little easier to type it in the calculator. So let me type it in the calculator from here. So order of operations, think about it. Do we multiply first or do we do exponents first? Exponents first. So I'm simply going to take 1.015, use my exponent key, the power, but the caret to the 16th power, hit the equal sign, and then multiply it by 15,000, hit the equal sign, and here's what it gives you. Can you see that on there? Yes, sort of glare, a little bit of glare, but not bad. $19,034, 0.78321. Is that how we write money?
No.
Right, because we're talking about money here. So what do we need to round it to?
2 decimal places.
Right, to 2 decimal places. So it's going to be how many cents? 78. And we throw the comma back in there. And in front of it, we include a what sign? Dollar sign. Okay. I'm going to move this up. You'll see it in just a second. There we go. Example number 2. We're going to buy a car. This car is a $30,000 car, so it's not a Corvette. So what is this $30,000 car worth if it depreciates 8% for 6 years? Okay, you're not going to own the car for the rest of your life. You're probably only going to own it for about 6 years. And then you want to sell it on Craigslist or Cars.com or whatever. So you need to know what it's worth. Yes?
You count the percentage, it goes down as soon as you take it off the lot. It takes off 50% too.
Sometimes it does, yes. Yeah. So when it says it goes down 8%, yeah. When it says it goes down 8%, that's like an average over the 6 years. It might go down more right away and then less each after. Does that make sense, Marco?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, this is just kind of an average of it. Okay. So we're going to start with our A because we want to know the amount we're going to end up with, the total money at the end. And then we need our principal, our amount invested, our $30,000. Say goodbye, right? And then we're going to take 1, and this time the value of the car is depreciating, so we're going to subtract. We're going to subtract the amount. So at 8%, take the decimal point, move it 2 places to the left. That's going to give us 0.08, or 0.08, divided by the number of times the interest in a given year. Right? It doesn't say. It doesn't say. So it's going to be 1. Which technically, if you know that, you don't necessarily need to write that. Because when you multiply or divide by 1, you're just going to get back to the same number. Okay. To the power of the number of times per year, which is 1, times the number of years, which is 6. And then I'm going to simplify it just a little before I type it in the calculator. And so the total amount of money at the end is going to be $30,000. And then I took my calculator. I did 1 minus 0.08. I got 0.92. 1 times 6 is obviously 6. And then if you type that in the calculator, oh, You want to do the exponent first, right? Order of operations says to do powers first, so 0.92 to the 6th